Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we are talking about actual Nintendo Switch 2 details that have been reported by one of the most reputable video game sites there are, VideoGamesChronicle, and we're going to be breaking it all down today. But before we go forward, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, it just might be possible. So we actually have 5 different little nuggets here that amount to something pretty big, I would say. So the first thing they say, development kits for Nintendo's next console are now with key partner studios with launch planned for next year, sources have told VideoGamesChronicle. So something to point out is that they have multiple sources on all of this, so this makes it all the more likely that it's going to happen. Do take everything we're talking about today with a grain of salt, because until something is officially announced by Nintendo, we never really know for sure. That all said, this is fairly reliable, I would say, so I'm inclined to believe that what they're saying is true. And they're saying that there are dev kits out there, and we've already heard about different rumors talking about different dev kits being out there. This corroborates a lot of that information, it looks like, and basically, if there are dev kits out now, that suggests that we are approaching the release for Nintendo's next system. We are going to start to get more and more details as the months go on, and we are getting closer and closer. This is no longer a pie-in-the-sky dream. This is no longer just blind speculation. We're getting close. This is happening. Switch 2 is around the corner. But let's get into some more things they said. So, according to multiple people with knowledge of Nintendo's next-gen console plans, the company is likely to release new hardware during the second half of 2024. So what this suggests is that the second half of next year, it looks like, is when the system is coming out, according to their sources. Now, some things to point out, they use the word likely, and likely can hint at a few different things. One, it may be hinting at, hey, this is what we think may be happening, but you gotta take it with a grain of salt. That could be it. It could be that simple, because plans can change. It's also possible that maybe the actual release timing isn't totally set in stone. Perhaps their own sources are helping them to put out a more educated guess. And the reason I say this is because we have heard from other sources and rumors that we may be getting something sooner. There have been the financial reports suggesting that maybe something could come out in the first half of next year. The K has suggested the system won't be coming out until at the very earliest this spring, which would technically fall in the first half of next year. So there is some information out there suggesting that it could happen sooner, but it's probably a safer bet to think the second half. I think that's a little bit more reasonable. While I have argued that it's possible that we could see an announcement this year for an earlier release, there are some challenges. Firstly, I think that it would impact the holiday sales if they were to announce the system this year. The only way I can really see it happening is if they do a price drop. And as of Nintendo's last financials, they said there were no current plans for a price drop. Now, current plans can change 2 weeks later, a couple months later. There could still technically be a price drop this year, but it doesn't look super likely. So I think that wouldn't bode well for a Switch 2 announcement this year. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not looking really likely. Now, something that a lot of publications have said is that there's no chance of a system coming out until at the very earliest this April, because Nintendo said so. As far as I'm aware, Nintendo has not actually said anything like that. What I think a lot of people have perhaps misconstrued is that Bloomberg, they put out an article during Nintendo's financials when that information came out, and the president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, said that they were forecasting 15 million Switches sold, and that's what they're accounting for in their numbers for this fiscal year. They're not including any other hardware. So some people took that to mean that they're not including any of their hardware because nothing is coming out. That may have been implied, but my point is that with that wording, if they were to announce a system and it comes out by the end of the fiscal year, they would never have lied. It's still technically possible something could come. That all said, while I think it's possible we could get a Switch 2 early next year, it doesn't look like it's likely. I do think it makes more sense to expect this system sometime between the months of July and November at this point. That does seem to make sense. There are some of those financial reports of those manufacturers. They may not have a solid estimate of when the system is actually coming out. We shall see. But if Video Games Chronicle is saying the second half of 2024, I'm more likely to believe what they're saying as opposed to some different financial reports for some different companies. Moving on though, although specific details on the console are being kept closely guarded, those VGC spoke to indicated the next console would be able to be used in portable mode, similar to the Nintendo Switch. And this is actually a big deal. So there's been some debate of Nintendo's next system not even really being a Switch, to which I've disagreed with that. But now with this, the whole idea of calling it a Switch 2 is no longer really a stretch. Now, when we say Switch 2, it's just shorthand. We don't know what Nintendo will actually call the system. It's easier to call it Switch 2 than the next generation Nintendo console of the Switch. Like, it's just simpler. But once Nintendo gives us a final name, obviously we'll call it that. But the implication is that it will be a follow-up to the Switch, and this supports that. Having a portable mode implies that it can also switch. It will be a hybrid system, and they're saying it will be similar to the Switch. So this is big news. We're getting a follow-up to what I think is going to go down as the most successful Nintendo console of all time. And I think it might also imply some backwards compatibility, but we'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. Two sources VGC spoke to suggested that the console would launch with an LCD screen instead of the more premium OLED in order to bring down costs. So this is something that's been discussed before. We've talked about it in different podcasts and videos. It's a little concerning that we might get an LCD instead of an OLED, because it may feel like a downgrade for some people who have a Switch OLED, then they buy the Switch 2, and they play maybe a game that is on Switch, say for example Tears of the Kingdom, on the Switch 2 because we're hoping it's backwards compatible, and they notice that it just doesn't look as good in portable mode. And that would be because the screen on the Switch OLED is more vibrant and colorful than your typical LCD. So games in portable mode may not look as good on Switch 2 if they're using an LCD compared to the Switch OLEDs. But the system will be more powerful. Games will likely have a better frame rate, likely have a better resolution, likely just be overall running and performing better across the board, and that may make up a significant difference, so it won't really matter too much. But it's also possible that this LCD may be capable of stronger colors, more vibrancy, so it'll be more comparable to your typical OLED screen. So whatever difference there may be, it may not be as significant as some of us may be concerned with. So I'm going to be optimistic here and hope that this LCD screen that we may be getting for the Switch 2 will be improved in some way to allow it to hold up in comparison to the Switch OLED screens we've already have. But now on to this final little nugget. Like its predecessor, the new Nintendo console will also accept physical games via a cartridge slot, the sources said. So this is big in my opinion for a few different reasons. One, for those concerned about it being an all-digital system, we at least have another generation before we have to worry about that, so that's great news. But also, physical cartridges are great. They load faster, they are nice and tangible, they're a little sturdy. I like them a lot. They're fantastic. In the past, it's been challenging for Nintendo to use cartridges because they are expensive to make, they don't hold as much storage, but they were able to handle things relatively well with the Switch, and as time progresses, that technology will continually improve and become more efficient. So I think this is definitely a great direction for the system to go in, especially because it facilitates backwards compatibility. And also by not having a disk drive, that's easier for power consumption, so better battery life. But in terms of backwards compatibility, I think this is actually likely. It's not a part of this article, by the way. They don't know about backwards compatibility. I'm making the leap that there will be backwards compatibility. If they're seeing that this is going to be a portable system similar to the Switch, if it's going to have physical based cartridges like the Switch, it's looking like it's set up to also be a system that will be backwards compatible. Historically speaking, Nintendo does like to follow up successful system with a similar system, and if you look at the 21st century outside of the Switch itself, which is a clean break from the disaster of the Wii U and also a progression of the 3DS, every Nintendo system was backwards compatible. So Wii was backwards compatible with the GameCube, the Wii U was backwards compatible with the Wii, the DS was backwards compatible with the Game Boy Advance, and the 3DS was backwards compatible with the DS. So most systems in recent times from Nintendo have been at least one generation backwards compatible. I think that the Switch will be backwards compatible. With such a successful system, it is trending in the direction to become the best-selling system of all time, not just for Nintendo, but just period. And the attach rates on the Switch are incredible. So many people are buying games on the Switch. It makes sense to take advantage of that. And with all these different people that have so many games, they're going to want to have a smooth transition. So I think it's happening. I think the news we've gotten in this article support it more so. If the reports were that this next system was just going to be a home console that only plays discs, then I would be thinking, okay, maybe it won't be backwards compatible. But because it's going to take cartridges, because it's going to be similar to the Switch, and it will have a portable mode, it will be able to switch, likely basically being a Switch 2, I would say the odds are pretty darn high. But overall, this is exciting stuff. We are getting legitimate information about the Switch, and now that dev kits are out there, we have a lot of sources on it now suggesting that dev kits are out there. We're getting legitimate details about the system, it looks like. We are getting close. I don't know if we're getting an announcement this year, because what we're hearing about here with VideoGamesChronicle would suggest that the announcement will probably come out sometime early next year, but we're not that far off. By holiday 2024, this system will be in some of our hands, or a lot of our hands, and that's pretty exciting. But what do you guys think is happening? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.